"Your sister Victoria has really made something of herself," my father Marcus announced during Thanksgiving dinner, raising his wine glass toward my younger sibling. "She doesn't need handouts from anyone." I sat there at the mahogany dining table in our family home in Bellevue, Washington, feeling the familiar sting of his words. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across Victoria's triumphant smile as she basked in Marcus's praise. She looked flawless as always, her Armani blazer perfectly coordinated with her Cartier watch. Everything about her screamed executive success. Victoria earned her senior marketing director position through pure talent, Marcus continued, his voice swelling with pride. "Look at her downtown condo, her Tesla, her wardrobe. She's completely self-sufficient." I quietly cut into my herb-crusted salmon, keeping my expression neutral. 18 months of these dinner conversations had taught me to stay silent while Marcus celebrated Victoria's supposed achievements and dismissed my work as a frivolous hobby. "She's pulling in 6 figures in digital marketing," he went on. "Not like Alina sitting at home making candles all day." Victoria beamed at the comparison. "Thank you, Dad. I've worked incredibly hard to reach the executive level. It feels amazing to be financially independent and making real impact in the corporate world." I nearly choked on my sparkling water. Financially independent. The woman who had begged me for $5,200 just last week for her credit card payments and condo fees. "Excellent," I said quietly, setting down my fork. "Then she won't need my monthly transfers anymore." The words hung in the air like the expensive diptyque candle flickering between us. Victoria's confident smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of pure terror. Marcus stopped mid-chew, his eyebrows furrowing in confusion. "What did you just say?" he asked slowly. "I said Victoria won't need my monthly support anymore since she's so successful and independent." I kept my voice calm, watching my sister's face drain of all color. Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. She had spent 18 months building this image of corporate success while secretly living off my earnings from what Marcus considered a silly candle business. Now her carefully constructed facade was about to crumble with just one sentence. "Alina, we agreed to keep that arrangement private," Victoria whispered desperately, her voice barely audible. "Keep what arrangement private?" Marcus demanded, looking between us with growing alarm. The dining room felt charged with electricity. I could see Victoria calculating how much she had to lose if the truth came out. Her entire identity as the successful daughter, the one Marcus was proud of, the one who didn't need family help, was about to shatter like the wine glass he was gripping too tightly. This was the moment I had been unconsciously waiting for. 18 months of being dismissed, 18 months of watching Victoria take credit for a lifestyle I was funding, 18 months of Marcus's constant criticism of my entrepreneurial work. The golden child was about to fall from her pedestal, and I was the one holding the rope. My name is Alina Gibson, and I'm 29 years old. For the past 5 years, I've been running an increasingly successful luxury fragrance business from my modest apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. While my family sees me as an underachiever who plays around with candles and essential oils, I've quietly built an empire creating exclusive scent experiences for high-end clients across the globe. My business, Ethereal Elements, started small but has grown beyond my wildest dreams. I design and produce custom fragrances for luxury hotels, exclusive spas, celebrity homes, and discerning private clients who want signature scents that can't be found anywhere else. Last year alone, I generated $850,000 in revenue. My profit margins are exceptional, and my client retention rate is nearly perfect. The irony isn't lost on me. While Marcus dismisses my candle hobby, I make more in a month than most corporate executives see in a year. But I've always been private about my success. I dress simply, drive a reliable Subaru Outback, and live below my means in a rent-controlled apartment. Money has never been about status for me, it's been about creative freedom and independence. Victoria, on the other hand, has always been obsessed with appearances. At 26, she works as a junior marketing coordinator at a mid-size advertising agency in downtown Seattle, earning around $42,000 annually. It's an entry-level position, but hardly the senior executive role Marcus believes she holds. 18 months ago, Victoria came to me in tears. She had racked up enormous credit card debt trying to maintain a lifestyle she couldn't afford. The downtown condo she had leased was bleeding her dry. Her Tesla payment was astronomical, and she was drowning in designer purchases she had made to keep up with her wealthy boyfriend and his social circle. "I'll pay you back with interest, I promise," she had begged. "I just need help until I get my next promotion. I can't let Dad know I'm struggling financially. You know how he gets about money and responsibility." Being the older sister, I felt protective. I agreed to transfer $5,200 monthly to cover her shortfalls, with the understanding that it would be temporary. Victoria promised she would use the time to get her finances in order and eventually become truly independent. Instead, she used my money to fund an even more extravagant lifestyle. She upgraded to a luxury condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, bought designer clothes monthly, and started posting on Instagram about her executive lifestyle. She convinced our extended family that she was climbing the corporate ladder at breakneck speed while carefully hiding the truth about where her money really came from. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his pattern of comparing us during every family gathering. He would praise Victoria's corporate acumen and financial independence while dismissing my work as a cute hobby that I'd eventually outgrow. He genuinely believed that Victoria's marketing coordinator position was more valuable than my thriving fragrance business. "Alina needs to get serious about her career," he would say to relatives. "Victoria is the responsible one. She's building something substantial in the business world." The worst part was watching Victoria nod along with these comparisons, never once acknowledging that her entire lifestyle was subsidized by the sister Marcus constantly criticized. She had become comfortable with the lie, comfortable with letting me fund her image while taking all the credit for success she had never earned. Tonight's dinner was supposed to be another celebration of Victoria's latest fictional promotion. Instead, it was about to become the night when the truth finally came out. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours but was probably only 45 seconds. Marcus set down his wine glass and stared at me with the expression he usually reserved for discussing my disappointing life choices. "Alina, explain what you mean by monthly transfers," he said slowly. Victoria shot me a desperate look across the table. "Dad, it's not what it sounds like," she began, but her voice lacked any conviction. $5,200, I repeated clearly, every month for the past 18 months. $93,600 total to cover Victoria's rent, car payments, credit cards, and shopping habits. Marcus's face went through several color changes, from confusion to disbelief to something approaching fury. "That's impossible. Victoria makes excellent money in her senior marketing position. She makes $42,000 a year coordinating social media posts for a small advertising agency," I said matter-of-factly. "Which is a perfectly respectable salary, but not nearly enough to support the lifestyle she's been living." "Alina, please stop," Victoria whispered, tears starting to form in her eyes. But I was done protecting her image. Her luxury condo costs $3,400 a month. Her Tesla payment is $850. Add in utilities, insurance, credit card minimums, and daily expenses, and she's been short about $5,200 monthly to maintain the standard of living Dad has been praising. Marcus looked at Victoria with growing horror. "Is this true?" Victoria's carefully applied makeup was starting to run as tears rolled down her cheeks. "I was going to pay her back. I just needed time to get established in my career." "Established in what?" Marcus demanded. "You told me you were promoted to senior director last month with a $25,000 raise. I coordinate Instagram posts and schedule Facebook content," Victoria admitted quietly. "It's not really senior anything." The truth was finally spilling out. For 18 months, Victoria had been crafting elaborate stories about her career advancement, creating fictional promotions and salary increases that existed only in her imagination and Marcus's proud retellings to friends and neighbors. "So while I've been telling everyone how successful you are, how independent you are, you've been living off your sister's charity." Marcus's voice was rising with each word. "It wasn't charity," Victoria protested weakly. "It was a loan. A loan with no repayment terms, no interest, and no end date," I corrected. A loan you never mentioned when you were letting Dad use me as an example of what not to do with your life. Marcus turned to me with a look I had never seen before. It wasn't his usual disappointment or dismissive irritation. It was something closer to shame mixed with curiosity. "How much money do you actually make with your candle business?" he asked quietly. I had never planned to reveal this information, but the moment seemed right. Last year, I grossed $850,000 through ethereal elements. After expenses and taxes, I cleared about $520,000. The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. He sat back in his chair, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. Victoria was crying openly now, realizing that her secret was completely exposed and her image as the successful daughter was permanently destroyed. Marcus's wine glass slipped from his fingers and shattered against his dinner plate. The sound echoed through our suddenly too quiet dining room as he processed what I had just revealed. $850,000, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. That's gross revenue, I clarified. My net profit was around $520,000, but yes. Victoria was hyperventilating at the other end of the table. Alina, you can't cut me off now. My rent is due in 3 days. I have credit card payments, car insurance, my gym membership. Maybe you should have thought about that before spending 18 months letting Dad believe you were more successful than me, I replied calmly, pulling out my phone. I'm canceling the automatic transfer right now. My fingers moved across the banking app with practiced ease. With a few taps, I deleted the recurring $5,200 monthly transfer that had been funding Victoria's fake lifestyle. There, I said, showing her the screen. Transfer cancelled. Marcus was staring at me like I had performed magic. You make more in a year than I made as a Boeing engineer in 8 years, and you've been sitting here letting me lecture you about getting a real job. You never asked about my income, I pointed out. You just assumed that because I work from home creating fragrances, I must be unsuccessful. Victoria suddenly stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Dad, you have to make her keep helping me. I'll lose my condo. Jasper will find out I've been lying about everything. Sit down, Victoria, Marcus said sharply, his tone cutting through her panic. You've been lying to me for 18 months. I wasn't lying exactly, she protested. I was just presenting the best version of my situation. The best version? Marcus's voice dripped with disgust. You told me last month that you closed $1 million client deal and got a corner office. Victoria's face crumpled. I knew you'd be disappointed if you found out I was just a coordinator. I wanted you to be proud of me. So instead, you let me believe Alina was the family disappointment while she was literally paying for your entire existence. Marcus stood up, his own chair joining the chaos. Do you have any idea how many times I've told people that Alina needs to get her priorities straight? How many times I've used Victoria as an example of what Alina should aspire to achieve? The irony was almost funny. While Marcus was holding up Victoria as the model of corporate success and independence, she had been entirely dependent on my financial support. Every designer outfit he praised, every luxury he celebrated, every achievement he bragged about had been purchased with money from my supposedly worthless candle business. Alina, I need you to reconsider, Victoria pleaded, moving around the table toward me. I'll pay you back with interest. I'll get a second job. I'll do whatever you want. What I want, I said, standing up to face her, is for you to stop pretending to be something you're not. What I want is for Dad to stop using you as proof that I'm wasting my life. What I want is honesty. Victoria's perfectly styled facade was cracking. Her expensive makeup was streaking down her face, and her Armani blazer was wrinkled from stress. For the first time in years, she looked like what she actually was, a 26-year-old entry-level marketing coordinator living far beyond her means. But Dad thinks I'm successful, she whispered desperately. Dad thought you were successful, I corrected. Now he knows the truth. Marcus was pacing the length of the dining room, running his hands through his graying hair. 18 months, he muttered. 18 months of bragging about Victoria's corporate climb while dismissing Alina's business as a hobby. It's not a hobby when it pays better than most Fortune 500 executives, I said quietly. He stopped pacing and looked at me with something that might have been respect for the first time in my adult life. What exactly do you sell? Luxury fragrances, I replied. Custom scent experiences for high-end clients. I have exclusive contracts with Four Seasons hotels, Ritz-Carlton properties, and several celebrity clients who want signature scents for their homes and events. Marcus blinked slowly. And this generates nearly $1 million annually. More some years, less others, but consistently profitable. Yes. Victoria was still crying, but now her tears had taken on a different quality. These weren't tears of panic about being discovered. These were tears of genuine grief for the life she was about to lose, the life that had never actually been hers. I need specifics about your business, Marcus said, settling back into his chair with new intensity. I want to understand exactly what I've been dismissing all these years. Victoria looked between us with growing desperation. She was realizing that Marcus's attention had completely shifted away from her crisis and toward understanding my success. I started Ethereal Elements 5 years ago, I began. I noticed that luxury hotels and high-end spas were all using the same generic commercial fragrances. There was no personalization, no signature scents that made their spaces truly unique. Marcus leaned forward, actually listening to me for perhaps the first time in my adult life. So I researched fragrance chemistry, learned about essential oil sourcing, and developed my own proprietary blending techniques. I created custom scent profiles that perfectly match each client's brand identity and desired atmosphere. And people actually pay serious money for this? Marcus asked. Dad, the luxury fragrance industry is worth billions, I explained. High-end hotels pay $15,000 to $30,000 for exclusive scent design and ongoing supply contracts. Celebrity clients pay even more for signature home fragrances that reflect their personal brands. Victoria was scrolling frantically through her phone, probably calculating her monthly expenses and realizing how quickly her world was about to collapse. My average project value is around $25,000, I continued. I complete roughly 2 to 3 major projects per month, plus ongoing supply contracts for existing clients. My gross margin runs about 65% after materials and production costs. Marcus was doing math in his head. 2 projects times $25,000 is $50,000 monthly, times 12 months, that's $600,000, but you said $850,000. That's just the custom design work, I finished. I also have ongoing monthly supply contracts with established clients, plus a luxury retail line that sells through select boutiques in major cities. The retail component adds another $200,000 annually. The magnitude of my business was finally sinking in. Marcus had spent years treating me like an unemployed art school graduate playing with potpourri in my apartment, when I was actually running a sophisticated operation that commanded premium prices from elite clientele. Where do you work from? He asked. My apartment has a dedicated laboratory and office space, but I also rent production facilities in Georgetown for larger orders. I handle all the creative development, client relationships, marketing, and business strategy personally. The manufacturing happens in my licensed production space. Victoria suddenly looked up from her phone with panic in her eyes. Alina, my credit card minimum payments alone are $2,300 a month. Without your transfers, I can't even make the minimums, let alone my condo rent. Maybe you shouldn't have bought so much designer clothing, I suggested. Or maybe you should have been honest about your situation instead of building a lie that required constant financial support. But what am I supposed to tell people? Victoria wailed. Everyone thinks I'm a marketing executive. Jasper thinks I make $95,000 a year. His friends think I'm successful. Tell them the truth, Marcus said harshly. Tell them you've been living a lie funded by the sister you and I both dismissed as unsuccessful. The weight of the revelation was clearly affecting him. Every conversation we had ever had about my career was being recontextualized. Every time he had criticized my work choices, every time he had held up Victoria as an example, every time he had suggested I get a traditional job was now revealed as ignorant and hurtful. I need to call your Aunt Penelope, Marcus said suddenly. Why? Victoria asked with dread. Because last week I told her that Alina should follow Victoria's example and pursue a traditional corporate career path. I told her that Victoria's marketing executive position was proof that conventional employment was more stable and lucrative than entrepreneurship. My Aunt Penelope, Marcus's sister, was a successful architect who had always been supportive of my unconventional career path. She had probably held her tongue when Marcus made those comments, but she must have known how misguided his perspective was. Victoria was spiraling into full panic mode. She had pulled out her laptop and was frantically searching for apartments she could actually afford on her retail salary. "Look at this," she said, showing us a studio apartment listing. 850 square feet for $2,100 a month, and it doesn't even have in-unit laundry. "Welcome to living within your means," I replied without sympathy. Marcus was still processing the business details. "Alina, when you said you worked from home, I pictured you melting wax in coffee mugs and selling candles at farmers' markets. I never imagined you were running a legitimate luxury operation." "That's because you never asked," I pointed out. "Every time I tried to explain what I do, you would interrupt with advice about getting a corporate job with benefits." He had the decency to look ashamed. "I thought I was helping. I thought I was encouraging you to be more like Victoria." "More like Victoria," I repeated. "You mean more like someone who lies about their income, lives entirely on credit, and depends on family handouts while pretending to be independent?" Victoria slammed her laptop shut. "I wasn't trying to hurt you, Alina. I was just trying to make Dad proud. By using me as the family disappointment while living off my success." The anger I had been suppressing for 18 months was finally coming out. "Do you know how many family gatherings I've sat through listening to lectures about responsibility and work ethic while funding your entire lifestyle?" Marcus walked to the window overlooking Lake Washington, his reflection ghostly in the glass. "I owe you an apology, Alina. A massive apology." "It's not just about apologizing," I said. "It's about recognizing that your assumptions about success and failure were completely wrong. Victoria's job title impressed you more than my actual financial achievement. But her position seemed more." He paused, searching for the right word. "More legitimate," I suggested. "More respectable. More like what you understand." He nodded reluctantly. "That's the problem, Dad. You valued the appearance of success over actual success. Victoria had a corporate-sounding title and wore business clothes, so you assumed she was thriving. I work from home in comfortable clothes, so you assumed I was failing." Victoria was crying again, but this time the tears seemed more genuine. "I never wanted it to go this far. I thought I would get promoted or find a higher-paying position and eventually be able to stop needing your help." "For 18 months?" I asked skeptically. "I kept thinking next quarter would be better, or next year. I kept thinking something would change. The only thing that changed was your spending," I pointed out. "Instead of using my support to get stable, you used it to justify spending even more." Marcus returned to the table and sat down heavily. "What happens now?" "Now Victoria figures out how to live on her actual salary," I said. "And maybe both of you stop treating my career like a cute hobby that I'll eventually outgrow." "And what about the money Victoria owes you?" Marcus asked. I had been thinking about this question for months. "I consider it an expensive lesson. I'm not expecting repayment, but I'm also not providing any more support." Victoria looked up with desperate hope in her eyes. "So you're not angry about the money?" "I'm angry about the lying," I clarified. "I'm angry about being used as the family cautionary tale while funding the very lifestyle Dad was praising you for. The money was my choice to give, but the deception wasn't acceptable." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was different than I had ever heard it. "Alina, I would like to learn more about your business. Not to criticize or suggest changes, but because I clearly don't understand what you've accomplished, and I'd like to." For the first time all evening, I smiled genuinely. "I'd like that too, Dad." 3 weeks later, I sat in my home laboratory, surrounded by hundreds of small glass vials containing essential oils, absolutes, and custom compounds from around the world. The money I had been sending to Victoria was now being reinvested into expanding my business internationally, and the results were already showing. My phone buzzed with notifications from new client inquiries. A luxury resort chain in Dubai wanted signature scents for their spa locations. A celebrity in Los Angeles needed a custom fragrance for her new lifestyle brand launch. A boutique hotel group in Tokyo was interested in seasonal scent programs for their properties. Victoria had moved into a cramped studio apartment 20 minutes from her actual job. She had sold most of her designer clothing and jewelry to cover her credit card payments, and I had heard through Marcus that she was working weekend shifts at a department store to make ends meet. The most satisfying part wasn't watching Victoria struggle with reality. It was watching Marcus come to terms with how wrong he had been about both of us. He had called me every few days since our Thanksgiving confrontation, asking detailed questions about my business operations. Not critical questions or suggestions for improvement, but genuine curiosity about how I had built something successful while he was dismissing it as worthless. "I told Penelope about your real revenue numbers," he admitted during one of our calls. "She laughed at me for 30 minutes straight." "Aunt Penelope always knew you were underestimating me," I replied. "She said she tried to tell me several times, but I wouldn't listen." Marcus's voice carried a weight of regret. "She said I was being an arrogant fool who couldn't recognize success because it didn't look like what I expected." That sounded exactly like something Penelope would say. She had never been shy about calling out family members when they were being ridiculous. "The worst part," Marcus continued, "is realizing how many people I told that Victoria was the responsible one and you needed to get your act together. I was bragging about her corporate success to everyone at the Boeing retirement party. And now I have to figure out how to explain that everything I said was wrong. That the daughter I was criticizing was actually more successful than I ever dreamed, and the daughter I was praising was living in a fantasy funded by her sister's generosity." The reversal was complete. Marcus's entire understanding of his daughters had been flipped upside down, and he was struggling to reconcile his assumptions with reality. The most dramatic consequence came when Victoria's carefully constructed social media presence began to crumble. She had built an enormous Instagram following by posting photos of her luxury lifestyle, her designer outfits, and her expensive condo. Her social media fed the narrative that she was a successful young executive living her best life in Seattle. Without my financial support, that content stream dried up immediately. She could no longer afford the designer pieces that had been central to her online image. Her luxury condo was gone, replaced by a modest studio that didn't photograph well for social media. Her expensive dinners and shopping trips became memories. Her followers began to notice. Comments on her posts shifted from admiration to concern. "Where have you been? Are you okay? Your content has really changed lately." Victoria tried to maintain the facade for a few weeks, posting throwback photos and recycling older content, but eventually people started asking direct questions about her apparent lifestyle change. The final blow came when Jasper, her wealthy boyfriend, commented publicly asking about the promotion she had supposedly received. He had been expecting to meet her new colleagues at the company holiday party, but Victoria kept making excuses about why he couldn't attend. Victoria's social media presence, which had been built entirely on the lie of her financial success, became impossible to maintain once the truth was revealed. She eventually made her accounts private and stopped posting altogether. Meanwhile, Marcus had begun telling people the truth about my business success. It was awkward for him, having to explain that he had been wrong about both of his daughters for years, but he seemed committed to making up for his mistakes by giving me the recognition I had earned. "I'm proud of what you built," he told me during one of our conversations. "I'm ashamed that I couldn't see it when it was right in front of me." Those words meant more to me than all the money I had ever made. Victoria's transition back to reality proved more brutal than anyone anticipated. Within 4 months of losing my financial support, she had been forced to break her condo lease and pay substantial penalties. Her credit score plummeted as she struggled to make minimum payments on cards she had maxed out during her months of luxury living. The downtown condo, designer wardrobe, and Tesla were all returned or sold, leaving her with barely enough furniture for her 600-square-foot studio apartment in a less fashionable neighborhood. Her relationship with Jasper ended abruptly when he discovered that her executive lifestyle had been entirely fabricated. She told me she was a senior marketing director making $95,000. Jasper confided to Marcus when he came by to collect some items Victoria had left at his penthouse. I took her to business dinners with my colleagues. She met my family. She talked about her executive decisions and corporate strategy. How was I supposed to know she was lying about everything? Marcus faced his own social embarrassment when family members and neighbors learned that he had spent months criticizing his actually successful daughter while praising the one who had been living on borrowed money and borrowed time. The revelation forced him to confront not only his favoritism but also his fundamental misunderstanding of what constituted real achievement versus mere appearance. I made assumptions based on what looked familiar to me, he admitted to Penelope during a family dinner where I was finally invited to share details about my business. Corporate hierarchy made sense. Traditional employment seemed safer. I couldn't understand how someone could make serious money selling fragrances from their apartment. That's because you never bothered to learn about modern business models, Penelope replied with characteristic bluntness. Alina built something innovative while you were stuck in 1985. As I reinvested the recovered $5,200 monthly into expanding ethereal elements into European markets, I realized that Marcus's years of dismissive comments had inadvertently become the fuel for my determination to prove that success comes in many forms, not just the traditional paths he understood and valued. The European expansion proved more successful than I had projected. Luxury hotels in London, Paris, and Milan were eager for custom-sent experiences that would differentiate their properties from competitors. My signature blend for a boutique hotel in Rome became so popular that guests started requesting bottles to take home, leading to a new revenue stream I hadn't anticipated. Within 6 months of cancelling Victoria's support, my business had grown by 35%. The money that had been subsidizing her fake lifestyle was now generating real returns through international contracts and expanded production capabilities. Victoria, meanwhile, had been forced to confront every aspect of her fabricated existence. Her social circle, built around expensive restaurants and luxury shopping, evaporated when she could no longer afford to participate. Friends who had admired her supposed corporate success lost interest when they realized she was just another struggling millennial with debt problems. I don't know who I am anymore, she confessed to me during a rare phone conversation 3 months after our Thanksgiving confrontation. Everything about my identity was built around this image of success that was never real. Maybe now you can figure out who you actually are, I suggested. Instead of who you thought you needed to be to impress people. The process wasn't easy for her. Victoria had to rebuild her entire life from scratch, starting with basics like budgeting and debt management that she had never learned because my support had always been there as a safety net. She moved in with a roommate to split expenses, started taking public transportation instead of driving, and began shopping at discount stores instead of luxury boutiques. For someone who had spent 18 months living like a successful executive, the adjustment was jarring. But gradually, something interesting happened. Without the pressure of maintaining an expensive image, Victoria began to discover aspects of herself that had been buried under layers of pretense. She started taking evening classes in graphic design, something she had always been interested in but never pursued because it didn't seem prestigious enough. I actually enjoy the creative work more than the fake executive meetings I used to pretend to attend, she told me during one of our slowly healing conversations. Marcus's transformation was equally dramatic. Once he understood the scope and sophistication of my business, he became genuinely curious about entrepreneurship and modern commerce. He started reading about e-commerce, digital marketing, and the fragrance industry. I spent 30 years designing aircraft systems, he said during one of our weekly dinners, which had become a new tradition. I thought I understood business because I understood engineering. But what you've built requires skills I never developed: creativity, market intuition, brand development. His newfound respect wasn't just gratifying, it was healing. For years, I had carried the weight of his disappointment, always wondering if maybe he was right about my choices being impractical or immature. You were right to follow your instincts, he continued. I was wrong to push you toward something conventional when you clearly had the vision to build something extraordinary. The validation I had been seeking for years was finally coming, but in a way I had never expected. Marcus wasn't just acknowledging my success, He was recognizing that his entire framework for evaluating achievement had been flawed. 6 months after our Thanksgiving revelation, Victoria had stabilized her finances and was slowly rebuilding her life on honest foundations. She had been promoted to senior coordinator at her agency, a real promotion with actual responsibilities and a modest salary increase. "It's not executive level," she told me with newfound humility, "but it's genuinely mine. I earned it through actual work, not through stories I made up." Marcus had also begun making amends with extended family members who had heard his criticisms of my career over the years. At our cousin's wedding, I watched him enthusiastically explain my business to relatives who had previously heard only dismissive comments about my work. "Alina has contracts with some of the most exclusive hotels in the world," he told our cousin Derek with obvious pride. "She's created signature scents for celebrities I can't even name because of confidentiality agreements." The irony was delicious. Marcus, who had spent years trying to convince everyone that I needed to get serious about my career, was now bragging about achievements he had completely failed to recognize when they were happening right in front of him. But the most profound change was in our family dynamic. For the first time in my adult life, Marcus was interested in my opinions and insights. He asked for my perspective on business decisions, my thoughts on market trends, and my advice about financial planning. "You've been successful in a field I don't understand," he said. "I'd like to learn from you instead of constantly trying to fix you." Victoria and I also began rebuilding our relationship, but on entirely different terms. The power dynamic that had allowed her to accept my financial support while never acknowledging it was permanently altered. "I know I can never repay the money," she said during one of our conversations, "but I want to find a way to make amends for the lying and the way I let Dad criticize you." "The money was my choice," I replied. "But going forward, our relationship needs to be based on honesty, not on me enabling your fantasies." She agreed, and slowly we began to develop a more authentic connection. Victoria started asking genuine questions about my business, not because she wanted financial support, but because she was curious about how I had built something successful without following traditional paths. A year later, I was featured in Seattle Business Journal for my innovative approach to luxury fragrance design. The article detailed how I had created a niche market by combining artistic creativity with business acumen, building a client base that included some of the most exclusive properties and individuals in the world. Marcus framed the article and hung it in his home office, right next to his Boeing Retirement Award. When visitors asked about it, he would proudly explain that his daughter had built an international fragrance business from her apartment. "I used to think she was wasting her time with candles," he would say with embarrassed honesty. "Turns out she was building an empire while I was too stubborn to see it." Victoria had found her own path to genuine success, though it looked nothing like her previous fabricated achievements. She had completed her graphic design certification and was freelancing for small businesses while maintaining her coordinator position. Her income was modest but honest, and for the first time in her adult life, she was living within her means without depending on anyone else. "It's not glamorous," she told me, "but it's real. And that feels better than I expected." The greatest victory wasn't watching Victoria face the consequences of her deception, but rather witnessing Marcus finally recognize and respect the business empire I had built while he was looking the other way. His transformation from dismissive critic to proud supporter taught me that sometimes the most satisfying vindication comes not from proving people wrong, but from helping them understand that success takes many forms. As ethereal elements continued to grow, expanding into new markets and developing increasingly sophisticated fragrance programs for luxury clients around the world, I realized that my family's initial lack of understanding had actually been a gift. Working without their validation had forced me to develop confidence in my own vision and judgment. The $93,600 I had spent supporting Victoria's illusion had been redirected into research and development for innovative fragrance technologies. I was developing scent release systems that could be programmed to change throughout the day, creating dynamic olfactory experiences for luxury spaces. My client roster had expanded to include private jets, yacht charters, and exclusive residential properties. Each project challenged me to push the boundaries of what fragrance could accomplish in creating atmosphere and emotional connection. "You've created something I couldn't have imagined," Marcus said during one of our weekly dinners, now held at upscale restaurants where he insisted on paying, as if expensive meals could somehow compensate for years of underestimating me. The complexity of matching scent profiles to brand identity, the chemistry involved in creating stable custom blends, the logistics of international shipping for fragrance products, it's more sophisticated than most traditional businesses I know. Victoria had joined us for this particular dinner, looking genuinely happy for the first time since her world had collapsed. She was wearing clothes from Target instead of Nordstrom, but her smile seemed more authentic than any expression I had seen during her months of fake success. "I wanted to tell you both something," she said, her voice steady with newfound confidence. "I got accepted into the University of Washington's graphic design program. I'm going to finish my degree part-time while working." Marcus smiled with what appeared to be genuine pride, not the performative pride he had shown during her fictional achievements, but real satisfaction in her honest progress. "That's wonderful, Victoria. How are you planning to manage the tuition and expenses?" "I'm taking out student loans like a normal person," she replied with a laugh. "And I'll be working extra hours at the agency. It won't be easy, but it will be mine." The contrast was striking. During her months of fabricated success, Victoria had been constantly anxious about maintaining her lies and keeping up appearances. Now, facing genuine challenges with honest effort, she seemed more relaxed and confident than I had seen her in years. "I owe both of you apologies," she continued. "Dad, I'm sorry for lying about everything and making you think I was something I wasn't. Alina, I'm sorry for taking your generosity for granted and letting you be criticized while I took credit for success I never earned." Marcus reached across the table and took both our hands. "I think we all learned something important about assumptions and understanding what actually matters." 2 years after the Thanksgiving revelation, Ethereal Elements had become one of the most sought-after luxury fragrance design companies in North America. My client waiting list extended 6 months, and I had hired 3 assistant perfumers to help meet demand. Victoria had graduated with her design degree and launched a small graphic design business specializing in branding for local restaurants and boutiques. Her income was still modest, but she was building something real through her own effort and creativity. "I look back at that version of myself and don't even recognize her," Victoria told me as we walked through Pike Place Market, where she was meeting with a potential client. "Living off your money while pretending to be successful, it feels like a nightmare I watched someone else experience." Marcus had become one of my most enthusiastic supporters, often referring potential clients to me and proudly explaining my business to anyone who would listen. The engineer who had once dismissed artistic work as impractical had developed a deep appreciation for the technical complexity and business acumen required to succeed in luxury fragrance design. "Your success taught me that my definition of legitimate work was too narrow," he reflected during a family barbecue at his house. "I valued titles and traditional structures more than actual achievement and innovation." The transformation in our family relationships was perhaps more valuable than any financial success I had achieved. For the first time, we were relating to each other based on truth rather than assumptions, and the connections felt stronger and more meaningful than they ever had before. As I stood in my expanded laboratory, now occupying a full floor of a converted warehouse in Seattle's Sodo district, surrounded by state-of-the-art distillation equipment and thousands of rare fragrance compounds, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The night I cancelled Victoria's financial support had been a turning point not just for her, but for all of us. It had forced honesty where there had been deception, recognition where there had been dismissal, and authentic relationships where there had been performance and pretense. Victoria's designer lifestyle had been beautiful but hollow. My simple apartment and modest car had hidden something substantial and real. Marcus's assumptions about success had been comforting but wrong. The truth, when it finally emerged, had been painful but ultimately liberating for everyone involved. My phone buzzed with a text from a new client. A luxury resort chain in the Maldives wanted to discuss signature scents for their overwater villas. The project would require traveling to their properties to understand their unique environment and brand identity. I smiled as I responded to confirm the consultation. 5 years ago, Marcus would have seen such a trip as evidence that I wasn't taking my career seriously. Now he would understand it as what it actually was: the international expansion of a sophisticated business built through vision, skill, and determination. The greatest victory hadn't been proving my family wrong about my potential. It had been watching them finally understand that success isn't defined by conventional markers like job titles and office buildings, but by the value you create, the problems you solve, and the independence you build through your own efforts. As Ethereal Elements continued to grow, expanding into new markets and developing increasingly innovative fragrance experiences, I realized that the years of family misunderstanding had actually strengthened my resolve and clarified my vision. Working without their initial validation had forced me to develop unshakable confidence in my own judgment and abilities. The $93,600 that had once funded Victoria's illusion was now generating returns that exceeded our family's highest expectations, proving that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the simple act of refusing to enable someone else's lies while finally allowing your own truth to be seen and celebrated.